entitled Application Portfolio Management using Sparx Systems Architecture Platform. My name's Scott Hebbard. I'm the Communications Manager here at Sparx Systems, and I'm joined today by Nizam Mohammed. I've had the great pleasure of working with Nizam for a large number of years. Nizam has over 15 years experience with Sparx Systems Enterprise Architect, Prolaborate, Cloud Server, and the application suite. Nizam is an enterprise architect consultant, a Prolaborate evangelist, and has a great deal of expertise in training, consultation, customization, and support. So it's a great pleasure to have you here with us today, Nizam. The agenda, I'm going to briefly talk about how to submit questions. We're then going to discuss application portfolio management, look at Prolaborate, Enterprise Architect, the Cloud Server, and discuss and demonstrate APM using the Sparx Systems tool suite. And at the end of the session, we will have some Q&A with the audience, and we'll answer some of your questions. So please note that audio is muted for all participants. You'll be able to type questions to the host. And if we can't answer all questions live, we'll follow up offline. So on the right-hand side, there is a question box. So simply enter the question there, and you can hit send or hit enter on the numeric keypad. Today, we also have a handout that's available. It's a PDF. So under the handout section, you'll be able to download that handout so that you can have a keepsake and some notes, so you don't have to jot down notes during the session, and you can focus on what's being said. But right now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to hand over to Nizam, who's going to present on application portfolio management. So I'm really looking forward to this session. And so I can see everything on screen, Nizam. So I can see some nice dashboards and the QR code. So I'll let you get started. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Scott. Hello, everyone. This is Nizam. Thank you very much for joining. So today we'll be looking at application portfolio management using the Sparx Systems Architecture Platform. This is the second in the series of enterprise architecture capabilities using the platform. And if anyone have missed it, the previous webinar on business capability maps is available in YouTube. The link to which is also given in the handout, so you could take a look at it at your convenience. Myself, I'm Nizam. As Scott mentioned, I've been working with Sparx Systems in various capacities over the last 15 years. Have a bit of experience consulting for several clients in implementing EA. So I've just tried to accumulate my experience and share a few thoughts on how we could go ahead with an application portfolio rationalization exercise using EA. And just before we get into the actual topic, I would like to set the context on the Sparx Systems platform. So Sparx Systems, as you know, it's been Enterprise Architect has been the flagship tool for the last 20 years. But what we refer to as the platform is a combination of the modeling environment, the publishing and sharing tool called Prolaborate, and the APIs and the integration support offered by PCS. So together, this offers a comprehensive platform that enables enterprise architecture not just at a technical level, not just at an architect's level, but at an entire organization. And also in order to cater to the evolving requirements of any modern organization to have multiple tools seamlessly integrated, the platform also has a ready out-of-the-box capability to plug into the various other enterprise tools such as Jira's and SharePoints and Confluences and ServiceNows of the world. So this is the platform that we'll be referring to in this webinar, and I'll also be using an additional capability which some of you may be familiar with, which is an integration available for Microsoft Office, which will allow us to import external data sources. So this would be the set of tools that I'll be using in this webinar. And in terms of agenda, so we'll quickly look at what at least I refer to as application portfolio rationalization, because there are some book definitions and there is also multiple interpretations of it. And then we will go through the four or the three important steps that I see should be done as part of an APR exercise. And we'll be using Enterprise Architect and Prolaborate extensively to see how we can achieve some of the objectives as stated in this. And then we'll also see how set up like this with a living and breathing repository powered by reports and dashboards will help us drive some meaningful insights as a result of this exercise. So to start with, what we mean by APR, as most of you know, we work with organizations where they kind of procure and acquire applications. Thousands of them in order to make sure they keep in par with the evolving needs of the teams. However, as we also know, as there are more acquisitions or as there are more mergers and things like that, or even as software gets obsolete, we keep procuring them and the applications just keeps mounting. And APR is a sort of a due diligence that we do to prioritize and focus on those applications that are of high business significance and of criticality to the end users, and also make sure that we are eliminating all the redundant applications or reducing duplication in efforts for the applications that are in our portfolio. And as part of this exercise, what we will try to do is to understand firstly what we have in terms of an application inventory. So getting a view of what is there and what kind of tools are available for us to create such a view. And then we'll be looking at how it aligns with the business capabilities that the organization supports, or the business values that we are working towards, the goals, objectives. So we will try to align the applications with the business strategic objectives and see which ones still are relevant. And then we will also try to scope out, do slice and dice of the current application inventory to figure out or to obtain some insights that will let us do our the time or the most coveted time analysis, like tolerate, invest or divest kind of decisions based on these insights. And finally, what all this will offer us is a more optimized or a streamlined spending on application. So an application is not just about just buying the licenses. As we all know, it's more maintenance, keeping them intact, the support that goes with it. So there's an investment, there is an expense to the organization. So a conscious effort to reduce redundancies goes a long way in saving the bottom line. So with that as a context, there are several things that we expect as part of an enterprise architecture platform's capabilities to help us achieve this. And we are just going to see a few pointers or few important things that most of the the architecture standards and recommendations say we need to follow. And we'll be using the tools extensively to see how this can be achieved. So as a first step, it's recommended to do scoping, an application scoping. And what that really means is, like as we just discussed, there could be hundreds or thousands of applications depending on the scale of the organization that are available in our inventory. Even some of them may not have even been documented. But as a first step, what we would like to do is to create some proper scoping views, so that we can classify applications either functionally or through business priorities, and get an idea of which subset or what subset of our entire inventory are we going to start focusing on. It could be on several attributes that we have captured against these applications. It could be business attributes, or it could be something like architecture type, it could be anything as the need suggests, but identifying the set of applications or scoping the applications is one important step that we start with. So to do that, these are some of the examples that we can do using like Enterprise Architect and Prolaborate. So just again, before I start, I'll just get my actual models in front of you so that you know what we are talking about. So I am talking about a EA model, which has the standard enterprise architecture contents in it, the BAIT layers, which has an application inventory. Um, we'll talk about this a little more. And these applications have interconnections. They are connected to the strategy layer. They are connected to the business processes, to the data, to the technology. And this coupled with the Prolaborate, which is connected to the enterprise architecture repository and feeds those data into dashboards and reports so that we could, these are real-time reports created out of this enterprise architecture model. So these are the two tools that we are using, and in both are live repositories. So we are not just talking about something static or put together. So it's something that I will be demonstrating as and when we look at new concepts. So to start with, we are, in terms of scoping, it could be done using various attributes, as I mentioned, but this is one view where I have classified my applications by its, by its life cycle, or in what life cycle are those applications at the moment, and vendors, heat map through using vendors. And the reason is maybe there is a vendor who we want to maybe terminate the contract, move to a new vendor. So we need to have an idea of what applications are supported by those vendors. So that is one very usual or common view. Or it could be an application by architecture type. So here I've kind of identified the web-based versus a client server uh, architecture type in the same set of applications. So I'm just categorizing this applications using different attributes. And this could be a starting point to ascertain which one of these should be retained in-house, which one of these should be moved to cloud. So any of those decisions could be a starting point to do something like this. Or it could be even which business units, which applications support which business units, and what are the statuses or the life cycles of those applications. For example, an orange will indicate an application that's expected to be sunset very soon. So something that highlights, hey, this business unit is kind of relying on 2 applications expected to be sunset. So possibly, that should be the focus area. It could be very small subset, or it could be a whole a different dimension where we just take corporate center and focus on it. So any of these attributes could be that starting point. However, the ability for us to slice and dice this applications that we have in these different dimensions will be the first step in terms of identifying the scope. And just taking a look at these live dashboards that we have built here, I'm just going to take a moment to show you how to define one of these as well. So I'm just going to, so these are some of the predefined dashboards that I've already done, but as we are here, and I assume a little bit of EA understanding in some of the words that I will use here, but if you're not clear, we can always give you more literature to explain it later. So I'm just going to do a dashboard to show how I put together one of these. So applications test. So if I want to create a landscape, a view of my applications and heat map it or group it by certain category. So I'm just going to say I want to create a EA chart. So bear in mind, this is Prolaborate application that is connected to a live EA repository, like an enterprise architect model. And I'm just going to say I want to create a landscape view. And I'm going to use my applications. So this I'm browsing my underlying model, and I'm just saying I want to create a landscape of my COTS applications. And the moment I choose, Prolaborate will say what kind of artifacts it's able to identify in that particular package. And then I'm going to group it by business unit and color coded by life cycle. So it's all these are intuitive. So the Prolaborate will automatically probe your model and get you the list of attributes that you can use to create or slice and dice your model. So that's as simple as that. And then these are aesthetics. So you could choose what suits your organizational theme or things like that. But for now, I'm just going to keep it very simple. And then I'm going to save this widget. So it's a new dashboard. I added a new widget, which is going to help us build a live view of my applications grouped by business unit and heat mapped by the life cycle that I've captured against these applications. So I purposely did this live to show the kind of efforts that we are expecting to create a view like this. So it's and of course it doesn't come up right out of the box, but there are some careful efforts that I have put or I've done already to get to this state, which I'll give you a walkthrough in the next couple of minutes. But this is the effort that we are looking at to build a view. So now just going back to the scoping exercise. So each of these views were built using different attributes as a starting point. So this will be the first step in any of the application portfolio management exercise to get an inventory of what we have or get a current snapshot of what we have. Well, then is the importance, then is the actual step of enhancing or building the application inventory. So when we start an exercise like this, it's highly likely there'll be a couple of applications in an Excel spreadsheet. There could be a couple of applications or configurations that are coming from an external tool, could be a ServiceNow or things like that. And what we would like to do is to bring them all together into a single source and then use that source to do our due diligence. And it could also be just a store. So, if you have another platform, like say, for example, ServiceNow, where all your applications or configurations are maintained, you could still use EA as a store. I mean, that's the power of these integrations that are available now. So you could create or import the data from ServiceNow into EA and then use that for your APR exercise and connect it to your strategy layer or connect it to your business layers and get more due diligence done. But what we are going to see right now is how do we do how do we start with an application inventory capture in the right way. So Enterprise Architect is a really powerful modeling platform, and out of the box, it supports a whole raft of architecture frameworks and modeling standards. For people who are already familiar, you would know that it kind of supports everything under the hood. Everything that's coming from the OMG is supported in EA. Be it TOGAF or UPDM or Zachman or Archimate, you name them, it'll be supported in EA. That is the real power of a multi-purpose, multifaceted modeling tool. However, when we start with an exercise like this, where we would like to engage a really broad spectrum of people and make them work together, it is always recommended to take a simpler meta model and a simplified interface that you can help people get familiar with, and then later on extend it as and when required. So what I mean by that is, instead of starting with a big bang approach and taking the entire TOGAF and trying to implement it, what we would recommend is understand what we really want to capture in a modeling tool. For example, if you're looking at applications, what are the key attributes that your businesses will be interested in? What are the insights that you need to present to your businesses? So that should be a starting point. And with that in mind, we can, these are just examples. Sorry, I did a spin. So these are just examples of some of the attributes that are commonly captured as part of an application inventory, but this is not an exhaustive list. This is an exercise that we do as a first step that it usually involve the business and IT leaders and understanding what are their priorities in terms of reporting, and then defining a common set of attributes that we would like to see in the model. And once that is done, which is the hardest step in my opinion, then we could go ahead with ad hoc start. We could just ask people or ask the architects to use the TOGAF toolbox or an Archimate toolbox and start adding those attributes manually, or we can have a systematic approach to it. And what I mean by a systematic approach is we put together a meta model. A meta model, a TOGAF is a meta model as well. But what I'm recommending is a subset or an extended version of any of these frameworks that caters to our specific needs. And once that is done, what we could do is we can identify all the individual artifact types that will suit our business requirements, and then also capture all the attributes that we would need under those stereotypes to do the due diligence. So with these two information in hand, if we start with a meta model definition, EA allows us to scale it up later on if required. But a recommendation is to start really small and simple, and make the team get comfortable with it, and then scale it up later on. So a meta model definition, in my opinion, is one of the first steps that we need to do. And using that as a starting point, then we go ahead and do the necessary configuration in EA to help us build this inventory. So once we have a clear meta model in place, then we could use several tools in the Sparx suite to import your applications into the application inventory. So it could be an integrate and import from external tools such as ServiceNow, or it could be the Excel spreadsheets that are already available, and there is no particular format that EA expects. It's very configurable import utility that I'll show you in a moment as well, and you can import that into EA as a starting point. Or there are also some web-based spreadsheets that you could use in Prolaborate to bulk create elements and edit elements. So this is the configuration that we are talking about. So what we are, what we will have as a result of a meta model based approach is a toolbox that kind of confines or that kind of limits the entire modeling tool to a particular meta model. It will eliminate all those additional things that are available out of the box and helps us focus on one particular modeling approach. And that modeling approach will be highly streamlined, that you all you need to do, or as a team they should be able to do, is just drag and drop, and the moment they do it, it will give them exactly the sort of attributes, sort of connections that are expected in that model. So let me just show you using a demo. So this is a demo model where I have this meta model that I'm talking about enabled. And what we are looking at is, when we say add a new diagram, instead of looking at the generic out of the box standards, we are looking at something like a custom architecture diagram. And that architecture diagram has a toolbox that implements my meta model. And that is all. So this has the vision, business, application, information, and technology layer. Pretty much everything that I have personally um, or I have kind of zeroed in as the things that I would need for my organization. And what this means is, if someone has to create a COTS application, he or she just drags and drops a COTS application, and that will automatically come up with the list of attributes that are expected and the list of values that are possibly captured in these as well. So instead of letting people do an ad hoc way to do this, we have given them a palette or a tool set to start with, and it's very clean and simple. Yeah. And what this also does is, these are all important for a proper application like portfolio management exercise, and that's why I'm emphasizing on this. Let's say I want to understand how my applications stack up against my capabilities. I have an L0, L1, L2 capability. My modeling exercise should make sure I connect my applications to the right level. And these are the kind of challenges that we face. Usually people may end up connecting it to a different level. But with a proper meta model, what EA will allow you to do is, it will prevent people from doing something that's not accepted. So I'm trying to connect this to an L0 capability. It won't. L1, it won't. L2, it will say you can do an association. So it's governance and model validation very well implemented. So you can prevent people from doing something that doesn't conform to your reporting requirements. It's these kind of discipline that kind of helps us build these real-time views that are meaningful and doesn't show up anything like that's a noise. So this first step is very important, and that's I mean, if you'd like to have this MDG or anything available, just drop an email to us, and we'll share that to you with the meta model definition as well. But once that is done, what we are looking at is everywhere the users are expected to see only those attributes and details. So this, for example, is an application inventory view in Prolaborate as a list that anyone could click, look at its details, and edit in if required. And you could see those attributes are, I mean, it doesn't show all the zillions of attributes that usually shows up in an architecture tool and mostly irrelevant. It just shows them what we have already configured. And even more, Prolaborate can be also used as a tool to let your application managers or your application support teams update your model information. It's not just about capturing it one-off. A key challenges is also in maintaining your application inventory, and those teams who are totally into a different world where we would be finding it really hard to get their acceptance to log into an architecture tool and update. We can still let them do the updates by sharing them a link to a list of applications that they have to focus on, and they can use Prolaborate to modify or update those values. And even those updates are governed or adhering to the meta model that we already defined. So this is just an example to show how these drop downs are also very well defined, and it's a one-off exercise that we do in the beginning. And with this kind of rigor already in place, we can now go ahead and import external sources and make them conformant to this meta model as well. So this is the MDG or the office integration that we see being used in a number of the model harvesting exercise, where we could have an Excel spreadsheet seamlessly imported into EA. So this, for example, is an Excel with a list of applications and all the attributes, and it's very common to for teams to have something like this floating around. And we will just quickly see how easy it is to convert something like that into a model. So I'm just going to use this importer or the Office Excel importer to choose that Excel spreadsheet and say, I would like to import it as my COTS applications. And I'm going to choose, this is a profile or a predefined configuration that I've done, mapping my columns to my EA attributes. And that is a reusable profile. And once we are defining the meta model, we can have these profiles defined as well. And from an end user's perspective, this is the experience. So he or she chooses the Excel, chooses the profile, and go ahead and import. And that will create the entire app, the set of applications that we have in Excel in EA. And it's not just dumping it as boxes here. Rather, it will have the proper type applied to it. So it's a COTS application stereotype with the right level of attributes added to it, and then it immediately fits into your modeling practice. So if I apply a diagram legend, it automatically creates that heat map. So for people who are already familiar with it, this is one very useful feature in EA called diagram legend, where we can map it to an attribute or a tagged value of my model and do the heat mapping automatically. So what I just demonstrated is I imported a couple of applications from an Excel, and it's automatically conforming to my expected modeling standards. So this is an important step. And same thing we could do, like we can import from ServiceNow or any other tools as well. So for example, let me go to my application inventory. As much as I have a set of applications that I either modeled it in-house or like have it uh, manually created from Excels, I can also have an equal number of applications which are connected to an external tool. So these are all ServiceNow um, applications, and you could even see the link which is maintained live, and these attributes are only stored in EA and mastered in ServiceNow. So every time these changes in ServiceNow, it gets automatically synchronized in EA as well. But why do we do this? Even these applications, once it's imported into EA, it becomes part of my enterprise architecture model. So this application, for example, coming from ServiceNow, is just the source is different, but the way it's connected to my capabilities or processes or infrastructure layers or projects or data is pretty much consistent with the other set of applications that I imported from Excel as well. So it's the creation could be in different ways, but from there, all the the intelligence that we could do, or the slicing and dicing we could do, is pretty much the same for both. So this is another editor that that Prolaborate offers, where you could also use this to import a CSV, or you could type information pretty much like you do in Excel and create elements in one go. So there are multiple ways to help us build that initial application inventory. And this, as you know, is one of the most important steps. And there is with all these possibilities, it just makes it so easy for any application architects to get started with it fairly easily. And once that is done, then we can go ahead and use those attributes that we have captured. So as we just saw, each of these applications would have a fixed number of attributes that we have zeroed in on and configured in EA to make sure this helps us with our analysis. And using that, you will be able to create several views. Some of the most commonly used views for application rationalization is creating a view of my applications stacked against strategic importance and technical completeness. You could call it technical health, you could call it technical completeness, but this is a very important view that will help us do this coveted time analysis, where you could ascertain which of these applications should have should be tolerated, should be invested more, should be migrated and eliminated. So this decision is something that is being documented and recommended by experts throughout, and a bubble chart using Prolaborate could help us create something like this. And then we have more rationalization visuals, where I am trying to see my alignment, the alignment of my applications to my business capabilities. So I have my L1 capabilities and L2 capabilities in my in I mean that I've already documented, and I'm seeing how my applications align with them. And you could see I've also heat mapped using my the application's lifecycle. So if any of these capabilities are using an application that's expected to be sunset. For example, this corporate, this particular capability is using an application that's marked as sunset. So that's a flag. That's something that we need to pay immediate attention to. We'll come to it again when we look at insights. But and once an inventory is built, then you have all the venues to slice and dice it in different ways. So this is another very commonly used view, where we have the business values, which are connected to your capabilities, and the capabilities are connected to applications. So I can have a business value driven view of my applications, and again ascertain which of these applications or which of these values are under threat or something that needs immediate attention. And then once we do that, and once we mark it as the target state, and this is what we have to do with our current set of applications, we can then create these the road maps, as they are commonly called. And there is quite a flexible approach to creating these roadmaps, and these are dynamically created as well. So if you have noticed, that's one of the attributes that we have, or I had as part of my initial model, where I have a go live date and a sunset date, which is expected to be captured as part of this rationalization exercise. And once that is done, I'll be able to create these roadmaps, which gets dynamically updated as the statuses change. So let me just take a quick look at the live dashboard, just to show none of these are made up pictures. All these are connected to my underlying model, and these are interactive as well. So if I want to update one of this, I'll be able to go into that particular application, look at its details, and say I would like to update the information where the strategic importance is not 4, rather it should be 7. Let's say I'm just making a change to this particular application using Prolaborate, and then the next time the chart is done, it kind of automatically gets refreshed to that value. So what we are essentially creating is a repository that could be maintained and managed by people who have the permission to do it. By the way, these are very highly like it's granular control for different roles. So you could have a configuration to say which role can edit which attribute. So it's not just read or write. You could say application manager can edit these 3 attributes. Support team can edit only these 2 attributes. So you could go and define these forms and set granular access control at an attribute level. So Prolaborate gives you that kind of a flexibility as well. So just going back to this. So all these APR views are dynamically generated based on the inventory and the attributes that we have captured. And Prolaborate is also the collaboration platform, and which plays a key role here as well. As we are building the inventory, as we are creating these views, we would always want to make sure that the right audience are also involved at those in those stages. And Prolaborate exactly allows us to do that, and avoid a state where we end up going too far in one direction, and then the stakeholders kick in and say maybe that's not what they really wanted. So it's a way to have a continuous engagement and getting their feedback through structured reviews, notifications, alerts, to let them know that there are a few things that requires their attention. So you could have a full-fledged discussion platform on top of these applications and dashboards, which will send email notifications to them, which will say in-app notifications to them. And then you could also have people invited through emails and quick links, like just sharing them a link to invite them to share their feedback and collaborate. So this collaboration piece, which is seamlessly built on top of these dashboards and reports, also plays a key role in maintaining the application inventory to be very relevant to the wider stakeholders. So that is that kind of looked at, we kind of looked at the application inventory phase, like building it and also creating those rationalization maps that that will help us do the slicing and dicing to help us ascertain which applications needs additional focus, or what's the roadmap that we are going to work on. Now what we are going to look at is, given we have all this information in a repository, and given that we have these abilities to create dynamic dashboards and reports, what else can we do? So let me just start with a few additional tools that will help your audience analyze and visualize these applications. So one is the coveted, like again, the most commonly used relationship matrix, which helps us generate a 2-dimensional view of how things are connected. So this is, for example, between your capabilities and applications. So I can see which application is connected to which capability. So it's a different way to look, like visualize your underlying model information. So you could apply filters. You could say which one of these you would like to focus on, and say just show me those in my view. And you can understand how your capabilities are stacked up against applications. Or you could also go, I've just created an analysis dashboard where I've created a number of these dimensions. So capability to application, business process to application, application to tech stack. So there are multiple views that you could create and offer to your stakeholders, so they could, instead of going into a model and looking at all the nuances, they could just look at it and understand how things stack up against each other, and also identify any gaps. So if there is a capability or if there's an application that's not mapped to anything, that's also shown here. So I've hidden empty rows, but you would be able to understand which ones are unmapped or which ones are just floating around. So relationship matrix is a very handy tool, and so are the impact analysis or the what if analysis views. So Prolaborate will also allow us to use the data in the model to create dynamic views like this. So I'm just starting from a project and understanding the applications that are connected to it. Again, this is a variation of the capabilities that we have in enterprise architect tool, but the fact that this is in a browser and anyone can do this makes it quite handy. So if any user wants to take a closer look, for example, someone wants to understand CRM in a little more detail, they could create a what if analysis view based on a predefined profile, and yeah, the Prolaborate will in a couple of seconds show what is connected to it and how are all those interconnected. So this is based on a predefined profile where I have my activities, my infrastructure, my projects, and my data model connected to it. So I can see it as a EA's view, or I could just see it as a generic node notations. But this allows people who are in between, so not the entirely technical people who will have the penchant to go to EA and do this, or the fully the people who are entirely away from anything to do technical, who just will be happy to look at the dashboards and understand it. So this is for people who are in between, so who really like to get their hands dirty, look at the application or look at the project and understand how that is connected to various other artifacts, but at the same time they may not have the time or patience to go through the learning curve that is required to understand the enterprise architecture tool in detail. So these kind of analysis capabilities are also quite handy, and that helps us maximize the value that we get by creating an application inventory. So to create an application inventory like this is going to be a significant effort, but with these additional tools, it also helps us engage more people to do due diligence. And just pushing this a little more, these are some of the examples. So some of the common questions that we would have been asked by other teams, and we will see how we could give it a stab using the information that we have to answer some of these questions. So this, for example, what is the TCO of applications, the total cost of ownership for applications? We can create this chart very quickly. So I'll look at the dashboard. Again, this is the benefit of having a web-based view. So you could just share a link to anyone, and just on a single click, they get taken to exactly what is expected to be shown to them. Instead of having Word documents or PDFs floating around, these are all dynamic, real-time views tied to your model, and you're just sharing it using a link, and just on a single click, they get taken to what you really wanted to convey to them. So this is the total cost of ownership of applications dynamically generated, and in many cases people would like to know how or which applications eats a lot of this. Of course, there are bar charts or bubble charts that we have seen in the past, but this is also a common question that comes to us. Similarly, let's say if a question says which of these capabilities rely on applications that are expected to be retiring soon. Again, another view, the same concept that I showed previously applies here, creating a landscape of my applications, but heat mapping on different aspects. So I have got my L2 capabilities, which are also categorized as high critical, medium critical, and low critical. And then we have the applications that are used, which are categorized as production, sunset, and UAT. And now if I look at this corporate communications capability, which has this alert DB marked as sunset, that will immediately help us get to that particular application that requires attention. So I clicked on that chart, it took me to a list view of it, and now I could look at what is happening with this. If I have to make changes to it, I can do it here, but at least these visualizations helps us navigate to the pain points or to the points of attention very quickly. Similarly, which business units rely on applications with lower technical completeness? Again, this is just yet another view, but these are just to give you an idea of how we could use this information to answer different questions. So this is applications with a low technical score. These are some other visualizations that we can use as well. So let's say group services applications or corporate center applications, these are all with a good score. So anything that is 7 or less, I've marked it as red. Anything beyond that is green, is what I've used as a heat map here. And if I go into group services, I could see a couple of applications with lower technical score, and those are the things that we need to focus on. So I can just click, understand what's behind. Similarly, this is yet another way to visualize the same, but just for group services, there are 3 applications that requires attention. And from there, if I just switch to list view, it kind of shows me exactly those applications that I have chosen, and then I can click on it and look at its details and look at it in more detail. So again, I'm quite conscious of time as well, but what we have essentially seen is what are the key steps in an application portfolio rationalization exercise, and how we can use the modeling environment that we are all familiar with to do this effectively. So a combination of these tools in the platform, in the Sparx platform now, makes a gamut of difference. Like it's not just a modeling tool, or it's not just a pivot chart, or it's not just something that is creating some fancy looking views. It's a combination of a living and breathing inventory that is integrated with external tools, and that's also integrated with reporting and insights factory. So you'll be able to create, maintain, and visualize your applications in a seamless way. So with that said, I'm just opening this platform for any questions that you may have. Like, I know I would have skimmed through a few of these concepts fairly quickly, but this webinar is more to give you an idea of what can be achieved. We have a whole lot of documentation on each of these topics and more videos to show how to build a chart, how to create artifacts, how to collaborate. So each one of these have a lot more documentation available, and if anyone is interested, we'll be more than happy to share that as well. And this is just to summarize a pretty picture like that we all go through every day.
Thanks, Nizam. It's great. I think it's really fantastic seeing how just in under a minute with a few clicks you can bring up a dashboard to show the applications used within an organization, that you can customize and modify things. So I will follow up on this question and on this page that you have available now. We've had a couple of people ask how they can get their hands on the TOGAF ADM based meta model and how they might be able to get some more information, and you've preempted these questions. So if people want to reach out and find out more, what's the best way for them to go about it?
Yep. Please drop an email to prolaborate@sparxsystems.com, and we'll be happy to share that MDG if that's all you want, or even if you want to have a closer look at these capabilities, we'll be happy to organize a demo and walk you through what we can really achieve with this. And we can even set up an environment where you can take your current EA model and try it out.
Excellent, thanks so much. You talked about the advantages of being able to share a single URL and send people to a web link, which gives them a live view of the repository data. Is it possible to customize it so that, for example, a project manager might see a different set of diagrams compared to a business analyst or someone working in the portfolio stack.
Absolutely, yes. And this like even the entire views that I mean the views that the users get to see and entirely depends on the roles and responsibilities and the permissions that they have. So depending on who logs in, the kind of dashboards, the kind of diagrams that are shown to them will differ. And even so let me just go to an admin view of it. So so I can go to even define what details should be shown to my end users. When I say details, even the attributes of an application can be configured. So if a PM is looking at it, he or she may be interested in a different set of attributes as opposed to a application support team. So this is a form designer that is driven by that MDG. And what this will allow me to do is pick and choose which of these attributes should be shown. And this can be done for different roles. So here I've got my business unit cost, go live date, etc. But I can just say I don't want this in this form, and it gets added to the back, like to the list here, which you can drag and drop later on anytime. But it's entirely customizable and even configurable at an attribute level. As I said, I could say even if someone has write access to this application, he or she should not be able to edit the strategic importance. So this kind of granular definition complemented by access permissions. So access permissions is something that I can do as an admin, which opens up only parts of my model to the end users. So you could see there are a couple of packages in my view, but the actual EA repository will have way more than that. So this access control, modeling languages, form designers, and granular user group management all together will be able to exactly determine what a user gets to see.
Thanks, Nazam. I think that granular control is really fantastic, and it gives organizations a great deal of flexibility about sharing information, but what types of information get shared so that the right information goes to the right people. So that's really powerful. There's a couple of questions from John and Richard that are along similar lines, and it says that you mentioned uh, um, ServiceNow integration, but they're asking about what about Jira, Salesforce, True, and Enterprise One. So perhaps what you might be able to do is talk about some of the integrations that you have worked with your teams, and if there's an integration that's not available, how you might be able to tackle that.
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question. And this is the product suite as it stands, and the Pro Cloud Server is the integration layer. So it's the set of REST APIs that allows us to connect to that external tool. Prolaborate is the curation layer, but the actual APIs are also available. Jira, Doors, ServiceNow, Confluence, and Polarion. There are some out-of-the-box integrations that are supported by Sparx Systems, but anything that's not in the list can also be easily implemented. So if there is a compelling requirement to integrate with a new tool, and if that tool also has a REST API, then we should be able to enable that integration. So we have done that for some custom bespoke applications. We've also done that for a HP CMDB system, which is we don't have something out of the box, but when we go for an implementation, and given both tools have a REST API, we should be able to get that integration in place. But the question was more around Jira's and ServiceNows and Confluences. These are all available out of the box, and especially Confluence and Jira is a very common use case, and there is I mean, I can share you some videos if you're interested, where you have a Prolaborate macro for Confluence, which will let us publish our EA diagrams into Confluence, like a live view of my EA diagram into Confluence pages, which is a significant value add, because in the past people have been copying and pasting diagrams in Confluence, and then it immediately becomes a static view. But with such live integrations, you are now able to connect EA, Prolaborate, and Confluence, and any changes to your diagram gets cascaded all the way to the knowledge base.
Thanks, Nazam. That's really great. And I think when we publish this on the Sparx Systems website, we will list this question, and perhaps you can include a few links to some of those previous videos and examples so people can learn more.
Sure.
Got another couple of questions. I'll try and get to them quickly. So Marcin had a question about, can you elaborate on your model, and said, did you use UML notation, Archimate, TOGAF in order to create the meta model? I think what's really powerful is that in Enterprise Architect, it supports all of those things, but perhaps you could just briefly mention how you went about creating your model and how great EA is at building all these elements.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, Scott, like the flexibility that EA offers is a big strength here. And for the meta model that I have put together here, I've mostly used Archimate notations, but I've also used BPMN because I would like to have a workflow instructions and things like that modeled using BPMN. But you could see these are mostly Archimate notations that I have used, but I have extended it to add my own attributes and connections and model governance. But the meta model could be entirely subjective to what you really want to focus on, and it could have a combination as well. I'm just trying to see if I have used any UML notations, but it's not very uncommon for me to for us to use a UML. Let's say a deployment diagram is a very commonly used representation that gets added to a meta model. So whilst Archimate will allow you to go up to a high level view of technology, the UML's deployment diagrams are very powerful as well. So it's common to have them included in the meta model as well. In this current implementation, I haven't used it, but the flexibility of EA allows you to use whatever artifacts. So this, for example, is a representational view of my meta model, and how I have zeroed in on what connectors or which artifacts are connected, and what are the details that I would like to capture in each of these artifacts. I'm using this as a meta model to define it, but then there is a exercise that we have to do to convert this into a UML, into a MDG. So if you need more information on that, again, I can provide it as an answer to to this particular question when we publish this webinar.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think the important thing is that Enterprise Architect is so customizable and has so many features, and out of the box supports TOGAF and Archimate and UML and a plethora of other different features and techniques which can take care of all of your modeling needs, which makes it so fantastic and powerful to use. So I might just follow up with one last question, and then I'll start to wrap things up. There was a question about some of the visualizations. Is it just the visualizations, or is there some more intelligence that can sit underneath that allows you to process that information and come up with some more intuitive and powerful insights into the model data?
I'm not sure if I exactly understand what kind of intelligence they're referring to, but when they say just visualizations, I'm not sure if it's just pictures. I mean, maybe I need a little more explanation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think what's worth clarifying is it's not just pictures, but you're looking at live data, and that
Yep.
what you're seeing is real-time information coming straight from the repository. So if someone comes in and makes changes to an application, then that's automatically being updated here in real time. So this is far more powerful than a static Excel spreadsheet or than a detailed report with pictures that are out of date the minute it's printed. So I think
Exactly. So we
what
could
the
click on
person
it.
was asking about was, you know,
Mhm.
is it just visualization or is there something more? And I think the fact that you have one of the world's most powerful modeling tools and you're combining all of that power for, you know, execution analysis, for simulation, for code engineering, for modeling, and then on top of that, you have this real-time access to data is really quite powerful.
Yes, that's right. So these are like real-time visualizations that you can interact with. You can click and you can navigate to those exact items. And then you can also look at its details and any changes that you make to these applications, either here or like, in any other form through the modeling tool or through Excel imports will automatically get cascaded to all these views. And just to push this a little more, let's say I understand, I build a view like this, which says this particular corporate communications AlertDB is an application that's marked to be sunset, but maybe that raises a flag and you go and fix it. Let's say it's not an application that's in sunset, maybe it's something it's in production. So I just make that change through Prolaborate because I figured it out that it was marked as a sunset application, and the next time I go back to that visualization, it would have already been updated as a production application.
Thank you very much, Nizam. So I might just wrap things up and finalize the webinar. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. This webinar will appear on YouTube, so on the Sparx Systems YouTube site, and it will also appear on sparxsystems.com. We usually try to get it published, the video, on YouTube within 24 hours, but we usually try to allow a week or so to get some of the Q&A completed and get some of the links that people have requested on our website. So allow a week for that and we'll get that up and running. But if you go to sparxsystems.com/webinars, all of our previous webinars, including the last application portfolio management and a lot of the previous Prolaborate webinars are all available. If you're new to this, we also encourage you to download an Enterprise Architect trial so you can have a look free for 30 days to see how you can model using the Sparx Systems tool suite. If you have any suggestions for future webinars or for ideas or topics, email webinar@sparxsystems.com. And yes, please download the PDF so you have access to reach out to Nizam and their team if you have any questions about Prolaborate or ProCloud Server and how that can help your business achieve fantastic results. So Nizam, I'd like to thank you for your time and effort today, and it was fantastic to see such a powerful presentation showcasing how the Sparx Systems tool suite can be used together to provide such an amazing result. So thanks for your time and thanks for your excellent presentation. It's been great to have you join us and share your expertise. So thank you very
Thank you very
much.
much. Thank you very much, Scott, and thank you everyone for joining and for your time. So look forward to connecting with you later on.
Okay, and I'll wrap it up there. Take care, stay safe, everyone, and look forward to seeing you again in future. Bye-bye.